Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabados of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service, jbiztechvalley.com, and now columnist for the Jewish Press.
And in the column I talk about how government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't as the case may be, and talk about government. So we have one of the biggest environmental advocates at the Capitol, Peter Iwanowicz. Welcome back to the Jewish View.
Great to be back again, Mark.
And
Thank
you're
you,
the
Rabbi.
Executive Director of Environmental Advocates of New York State.
I am, yeah. I've
So-
been there for 2 years now.
That's it.
Running the show. So
And
it's
you were
great
at
to be back.
Department of Environmental Conservation before that? Or?
Yeah, well, before that, I was actually flying back and forth every week to Washington, D.C., where I ran a campaign for American Lung Association of how to reduce air pollution and how to prevent sort of the attacks on the Clean Air Act. And then 2 years ago is when I started environmental advocacy. But before that, yeah, I was in government. I was running the environmental agency. I was working for Governor Patterson and Spitzer in their tenure. So I like to joke when people say my bio. I always say it's hard for me to keep a job. But there's a lot going on in this political space, and I've been in and out of the government for 30 years now.
And that's the same with me. Every 6 months, someone asks me for a new business card because they know that I always have something new going on.
What would you say?
But you don't
things
even
are
have a
getting-
gray hair, even you've been through all this, so that's good.
Yeah, look, my dad's just starting to get gray, and he's in his 70s, so
Wow.
maybe I can last that long. I
Those
don't know.
genes.
It's getting thinner, and there's some gray up there now.
What's your report card on the environment, though? Things are getting better, worse?
It's about holding steady in some key areas, like legislature sort of coming up with some new funding to clean up water infrastructure. Pipes underground are breaking. Sewer pipes are breaking far too frequently.
Because it's aging? I mean,
It is.
just-
Infrastructure is aging. It's really important. And people don't want sewage backing up in their basements.
Of course, yeah.
You
I had to
think?
replace my sewer line a couple summers ago, just running from my house to the street in Del Mar, and it cost me $10,000. So you can imagine
Really?
if
That's a lot.
the entire sort of town needs to get dealt with. And in Del Mar this summer, I mean, a lot of streets were ripped up. They're replacing a massive sewer
Yeah,
line.
saw there, yeah.
So
Well,
there
even
was
by
a
the
huge.
police station and the library,
Yeah,
I think they
the
were.
whole
They're
street
still
and all
working
that.
on
Yeah,
it.
they're
You know,
still
it's
working
the
on
project
that,
that
yeah.
started in the middle of the winter. It went through all summer, and they're still doing it now. So that's what I mean by sewage infrastructure and what's going on. And there is a huge, a multi-billion, tens of billions of dollar need statewide. And last year in the budget, the legislature, they pushed back against the governor. The governor included no new money for this, even though we had a lot of money last year for infrastructure. He included none of it in his budget. And the legislature said, let's put some money into this. So they created a 3-year program at $200 million to help communities with grants, not loans. This is direct grants to communities who are really in need. That's important. And
Need
this-
for, what are they going to get? Sewer lines, you're saying? Or?
Precisely. More funding without any strings attached, no loans. It's just straight grant money for needy communities so they can improve sewer lines. Also, drinking water systems. People get these boil water alerts, or you hear a water main break. That's the water we drink. And the aging infrastructure is crumbling, so we need more money to fix the pipes.
You know,
That's
I-
a big
I-
part of what happened last budget cycle.
I don't mean this as a pun, but isn't $200 million a drop in the bucket?
Well, the funny thing about whether we work on oil trains or water issues, there's puns all over the place. So it is a proverbial drop in the bucket. That's where we're fighting for more. We're just putting together a coalition that will include labor, local government, environmental groups, water engineers to push the state to do even more in the next budget cycle.
Do you think there needs to be Environmental Bond Act to do something like this? Or?
Well, it certainly would help, but we have more than $2 billion sitting in bank accounts right now from settlements with financial institutions. So there's plenty of money right now.
$2 billion with a
$2
B.
billion with a B. You know, there's a lot of money in Albany right now to put into projects like this. And rather than spend it on proverbial one-shots, this is the time to invest in our infrastructure to help communities fix their pipes. So that was a big part of what happened last year. We saw some bad stuff in the budget. The governor pulled some funds away from one of the agencies that was meant to reduce carbon pollution that is associated with climate change, and he put it into the general fund. It's really sort of, they robbed Peter to pay Paul in this scenario, and that was an egregious act. We really shouldn't see that going forward with the governor's climate commitment.
What do you say about air quality? I mean, is that getting better? I mean, not even a year or two, but maybe let's say a 10, 20-year graph.
Tremendously improved
Oh, that's
air
good.
quality. Yeah, so the pollution reductions have been coming down, even though the
Because?
economy is growing. Because we've invested in pollution control technologies, because we have really good regulatory standards set by federal and state agencies that have ratcheted down smokestack emissions. And the cars we drive are worlds cleaner than they were even 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
Mark will remember this. We would battle with the car companies, in the mid-90s when Pataki was governor about whether they should be required to sell electric cars. Now they're out there marketing them. Indeed, one company has loaned my organization a car for 6 months. It's a plug-in electric hybrid car so that we could test it and become more familiar with it. So those laws and regulations that were set up in the early 1990s are bearing the fruit now in improved air quality.
And you know
Are
what?
we there yet? No, we have more work to do.
And you know
but
what's
it's
good
much more improved.
with the electric cars is that now that you got places that you can actually plug in, and whether it's at Colony Center or wherever, I mean, there are places around at least the Capital District where there are plug-ins, and you can go shopping and then come out and you got a recharged car.
Yeah, it certainly is beneficial to extend the range of them. But I got to be honest with you. We have a plug-in electric hybrid from one of the car companies, and I've been driving back and forth from my office to Albany, to Del Mar, round trip without having to charge it up. So you can really have an all-electric commute with a plug-in electric hybrid. You don't need a full battery one. And at night, I don't have to go find a charging station. I literally plug it into the wall socket of my garage.
Yeah, but
Charges
then
up
you're
fully.
paying the electric bill.
You know what? I looked at my bill,
Yeah.
$3 last month. That was the increase, September to October versus October to November when I had the car.
So this just started with the 6 months. So
did.
you're going to have it through the winter.
Yep.
Okay, now what about the trunk space?
Oh, there's no trunk space to really, mention. You can maybe, if you're lucky, fit a set of golf clubs in this trunk. So there are definitely some limitations. Has it gotten to this stage where it can fully supplant the typical sedan now? No, but that's why we're continuing to require
Sure.
the car companies to make cleaner versions of gasoline-powered cars to clean up gasoline. So
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that if you just need the commute and you don't need any space in the car, look, there are people who have just two-seat sports cars.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
little cars.
So, they
Right.
get by with that. So now
Yeah.
you can have sort of
You're absolutely right.
something that's not a sports car that
Yeah.
still has two seats.
Yeah, so last week I needed to go down to New York City, and I
Uh-huh.
used it in a sort of a dual mode situation, half gasoline, half electric, and I was getting 52 to 53 miles per gallon driving down the thruway, because sometimes it would run on the battery, sometimes it would run on the gasoline engine. That's pretty good, vehicle mileage that way. When I
Because
got to
that's
New York
like 3
City-
gallons.
Yeah.
That's 3 gallons of gas each way.
Yeah, and basically it was, when I was in Manhattan, I was running on pure battery power at that point. So in the urban environment, I wasn't belching on emissions to harm people. On the thruway, I was getting superior gas mileage. So those types of products are out there, whereas 20 years ago, we were constantly fighting with the car makers about doing this stuff.
So
So
you
that's
wanna-
why we can sit here today and say air quality's gotten better.
You want to give it a plug? What car?
No, I don't.
Okay, you'll get it plugged. Okay.
See? Puns are everywhere. We've
Yeah.
got 2 already in the set.
Flint's-
How
I mean,
many
New
more?
York City, you're up here in Albany in the Capital District, but New York City is probably worse pollution than, I'd imagine,
Yep,
than
you're absolutely
upstate.
right. Yep, more people, more vehicles, you have a lot more heavier concentration, so they have more bad air days in a typical summer than you would have up here in the capital region. But even there, air quality's been dramatically improved.
So can you tell us about your voter's guide?
Absolutely.
And tell us what the issues were and how many issues, and then who the best and the worst were?
Yeah, so I actually have 2 jobs at Environmental Advocates. I'm the head of our educational organization, which is known as Environmental Advocates. And then we have a sort of a political arm that gets into educating voters. And that's called EPL, short for Environmental Planning League.
Lobby.
Lobby, thank you.
I remember when
Environmental
Judy Anchor
advocates.
saw it. Yeah.
So we have, EPL sort of exists to help educate voters about where legislators are on their various scores. So every year we put out in the fall this scorecard, and we rank legislators on the votes they take on some key legislative priorities for us. There weren't as many votes taken this year. We're down in the single digits in the Senate and just 10 votes in the Assembly. So there weren't a huge amount of votes taken on environmental issues.
Is that
The
good or
factor of-
bad?
Well, there weren't a lot of bad things happening, so
Yeah.
that's good. But on the positive side, there was a huge amount of stuff that got left undone.
Uh-huh.
And that's one piece folks will find in our voters guide if they
So
go
who's the best and who's the worst?
Well, it really depends on the issue and actually in the House. Assembly Democrats definitely perform a little bit better than even their Senate Democrats and Republican counterparts. They certainly score a lot better than Republicans in the House. But we've seen bad actors on both sides of the aisle, with people getting pretty low scores.
Do you have favored in among Assembly Democrats? Someone who's close to 100% or 80%?
There are a number of legislators that get high marks. Typically, they're New York City based, but up in the Hudson Valley, members like Assemblyman Cahill in the Hudson Valley. Here locally, Assemblywoman Fahey does a really good job.
Dee Barrett?
As does John McDonald. Dee Barrett, I don't know if a score off the top of my head,
Okay.
but Hudson Valley members typically score pretty well on this one. There were a couple of votes in the Assembly this year that brought scores down. People voted for a bill that would expand the definition of biofuels, and we read that definition as being quite dirty. You know, you think of fuel that is sort of grown, either wood or plant material, you'd think, what's wrong with that?
Mhm.
But, you know, the level of cleanliness depends on how you define it, and they were broadening the definition, you know, too far for our liking.
Mhm.
So that brought some scores down in the Assembly. That bill did not get voted on in the Senate.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, in the Senate, there was a huge number of issues that they just didn't even bring up for a vote. And there were three in particular that trouble us from an environmental perspective, but it should trouble, you know, the viewers as well, because these bills all had enough co-sponsors signed on that if they were brought to the floor, they would have passed. But the current Senate leadership and past Senate leadership never brought these bills up for a vote, so sort of suppressing the sort of democratic principles of democracy.
Are you more hopeful with John Flanagan being the majority leader?
Well, I
in the
am.
Senate?
I have to be hopeful in my job,
No,
right?
but there are some people that say if John DeFrancisco won, you wouldn't be so hopeful because he got your oil slick award.
That's
So-
true, that's true. I mean, the first signal of, you know, Senator Flanagan continuing the sort of the ways of the Skelos Senate is that he did elevate Senator Flanagan to the deputy majority leader. So you have a situation where Senator Flanagan, as you mentioned, gets an oil slick award from us, which is not a award of distinction from the environmental and public health side.
Flanagan got?
I'm sorry, I
No.
misspoke. DeFrancisco
Right,
got the oil slick award.
right.
And he got it because he had a 38 score on the scorecard. He also debated members on the floor about whether diesel exhaust, the fumes that comes off of trucks, actually could make people sick. He said it doesn't, and denied sort of the climate change was happening and using the cold winters as his justification. So there were a number of, you know, things that Senator DeFrancisco championed this year that led us to give him this dubious distinction of getting an oil slick award.
So how does Senator Flanagan, as majority leader, how is his voting record? Does he have an idea off
It's
the top?
poor.
It's
to be
poor
honest.
still.
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
You know, he
not
got a-
worthy enough for an oil slick award, but
That's-
getting there.
That's right. I mean, he got a 44. His tenure was just new, so we couldn't really sort of define sort of where he was going to be in a number of different issues by that, unlike Senator DeFrancisco that, you know, took to the floor and debated these things during the budget and elsewhere. He co-sponsored a bill that would thwart Governor Cuomo's vision to reform
Mhm.
the energy vision. So, I mean, there was a lot of different things that Senator DeFrancisco was doing wrong last year that got him the award. Senator Flanagan, though his voting record was pretty poor, he didn't have the panoply of bad stuff that would give him that distinction. And I'm hopeful that, you know, they really do look at the scorecard, they really do look at their body of work, and suppressing these bills or not voting on them, even though they had majority support,
Right.
they'll look at that and say, we've got to be different than the Skelos-led Senate, and we should have a broader perspective, especially going into, you know, an even-numbered year from our perspective. That's usually when things get better because they're up for re-election.
That's right. So are you, so you gave Senator Skelos and Senator DeFrancisco oil slick awards?
That's correct.
Okay.
So Senator Skelos was given the award because, courtesy of, you know, the allegations that have been brought against him, I think all of us got a bigger peek behind the curtain of what happens in Albany. And the allegations against Senator Skelos in the federal trial that's ongoing now are that he was holding back on some bills being voted on because they would have been bad for his family's business interests, particularly his sons. Bills that would rein in climate change, bills that would deal with moratoriums on fracking, ran counter to the business interests, so they never came up for a vote. You know, so we sort of found ourselves in a position of siding with the Senate majority on this one, and the way that they dumped Senator Skelos because of these allegations, we decided that was worthy of an oil slick award. The allegations sort of rose to that level.
And the guy who got the best, or the senator who got the best award, championing your causes the most, was Brad Hoylman?
That's right,
He's a
Senator
senator
Hoylman from
from
Manhattan.
Manhattan.
This is his first year as the ranking member of the Environmental Conservation Committee, a tremendous presence on environmental issues. You know, this is going to sound kind of like, really, you give him an award for this? But showed up at every committee meeting, ready to debate the issues, vote on them, and have a substantive discussion. That's kind of unheard in Senate because they can vote by proxy. They don't even have to go to the meetings. They just sort of send a proxy in. So not only go to the meetings, he was well prepared, ready to engage. He went to the floor, ready to debate the issues and raise environmental standards to a new level. He also convened what we believe is the very first forum. They can't call it a hearing because they're minority members, but the very first forum to talk about climate change in New York State Senate ever. And you think about that, wow, the first time ever we've had a discussion like this. But what he did is he brought some scientists in to sort of underlay sort of what's going on in scientists. But more importantly, he brought in people who had been touched by extreme weather events, primarily Superstorm Sandy. They're on the front lines of climate change impacts. They're the people who are bearing the cost of the extreme weather events that are fueled by carbon pollution. And really what he did with that forum is put a human face on climate change impacts and underscore sort of the tragedy that's happening in communities, not only here in New York, but symbolically what's happening across the world as populations are impacted by extreme droughts, extreme weather events, loss of potable water, et cetera. I mean, all these things are the symptoms of our changing climate. They're only going to get worse. And on the floor, he debated issues such as we talked about earlier on diesel exhaust, on climate change, et cetera. So we really viewed him as an exemplar legislator that comes to work, ready to work on the environment, and is worthy of a legislator of the year.
So you got the 3 awards that you gave out were all in the Senate. You didn't give any awards to anyone in the Assembly.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we sort of looked at the Assembly, and while they were voting on bills and voting our way, we didn't see somebody that was worthy of an honorable mention or even legislator of the year. That we have new chairs in both houses, and we're hopeful that now that the leadership turmoil is hopefully behind us, who knows, you never know with the federal prosecutor, but hopefully leadership turmoil is behind us, they can really sort of buckle down and come to some agreements in 2016.
So now Bob Sweeney was the head of the Assembly, head of the Environmental Conservation Committee? And
actually, he retired.
And then he retired?
He did, yeah.
But he was the most, he was chair, and now he's on your board?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so he's golden with you. I mean, he's like
well,
the top.
he either got legislative of the year or honorable mention in all 7 years of his tenure as ENCON chair.
So he's just.
And our board said, let's see if he's interested in joining us to sort of sign up. What he's done is really bring to our board a huge amount of policy discussion. And we had a frank discussion with him, and he said to me, listen, I'm not on here as a figurehead or a letter, name on the letter. I really want to work the issues. And I said, that's what we want from you.
That's great.
So he's tremendous. And primarily, he's been, in retirement. He does a tremendous amount of social justice work, immigrant population work. He volunteers very frequently for Habitat for Humanity, going overseas to help build houses. So he is not interested in sort of, putting out the lobbying shingle and doing that at all. He's really enjoying what he's doing after a 30-plus year career.
So who's now the chairman of the Assembly Environmental Conservation Committee?
So Steve Engelbright, who's from out on the east end of Long Island, Setauket, Long Island, so on the North Shore, just past Stony Brook area. So he's now the chair. So
go figure, when they talk about liquefied natural gas and, the head of the Assembly, the chair of the Assembly Environmental Conservation Committee is living just miles away from where this LNG facility would be proposed for. Obviously.
Well, yeah, that one was further in off of Nassau, kind of on, that area, and then it was going to be on the South Shore, where Senator Engelbright's on the North Shore.
Yeah, but
I think the governor
it would
decided,
be on the South Shore?
Yeah, that's where it would have been.
Okay, because
there was an old one that was proposed for Long Island Sound decades ago that then Governor Patterson put a nix to.
Right.
This is a new one that would have been off the Atlantic coast.
Oh, so they tried the other side of the island, okay.
Yeah.
And that's the one that the governor nixed, okay.
Yeah, he did.
So what about, now, let me talk about microbead, the ban on microbeads.
Yes.
Because Albany County Legislature was focused on this like I've never seen them focused on any issue before. Tell me, what is a microbead and why should we care, and
Absolutely. So it's kind of interesting. You focus on little tiny bits of plastic.
It's not a nanobead, it's a microbead.
That's correct. Yeah, it's really small. You can actually see it in products. So these are little plastic pellets that makers of consumer products, face scrub and even in some toothpastes, they put this as an abrasive to help exfoliate skin. It's plastic, so when you're washing your face with this stuff, you're literally rubbing plastic on your face. The problem from an environmental and health perspective is They wash down the drain as you're washing your face or brushing your teeth and spitting it out. It goes through the sewer system, and it's not stopped at the sewage treatment plant, so it gets pushed out into the water body, where it collects in great numbers. Wildlife like fish and ducks and other waterfowl ingest it, so they take it into the system, and it makes its way up the food chain. And it's just, not a good idea to be dumping plastic in our pristine water bodies. We have a lot of problems with our water. Last thing we should be doing is dumping plastics. So, and this issue actually came from the Attorney General. He proposed a bill. It's passed the Assembly a couple of years in a row by huge margins, 139-1 last spring. And this is one of the bills that dies in the Senate. It has more than enough sponsors to pass. It was brought up for a vote, but it wasn't brought up for a vote. So after session ends, all these counties are seeing this report and saying, we should act. So local governments across New York State, started in Western New York and has started to make its way towards the Albany area. Then Long Island started to enact these bans. And so they're prohibiting the sale of products, and their skincare products primarily, that contain these little plastic bits. So over time, you'll see a phase out. But what it really shows to us is that when you get outside of the contentiousness of either Congress or the contentious political environment of the Capitol, and you get out to where things are a bit more real at local government level, legislators on both sides of the aisle band together to either sponsor, co-sponsor, or vote in these things. As you mentioned, Albany County did a week ago pass this ban. It's now headed to the county executive, but it was unanimous.
And I understand Suffolk County recently did something.
Suffolk did, Nassau's moving, New York City has pending legislation that will likely get a vote before the end of the year.
So if it's so small, if these beads, these plastic beads are so small, what difference does it make? I mean, I can understand if it was a large number, a large piece of plastic, but doesn't it degrade quicker, it being so small?
It doesn't, because it's plastic. Plastic takes a long time to degrade. You're not supposed to dump any plastic overboard in your ship. You can do all sorts of things, after you get 18 miles away from a coastline. But the one no-no in maritime is plastic. You can never dump that overboard.
No matter how minor and micro and nano it might be.
Precisely. So if you look at the maritime sort of regulations, everybody knows that that's just a no-no to be dumping that stuff. But here we have this standard that allows them to just dump this freely through our sewer systems. And those little plastic beads add up to a big problem over time. They get ingested and move up sort of the food chain. So, think of the fish and the birds you may be eating that have ingested this stuff. You're basically now ingesting plastics, let alone you may be brushing your teeth with these little plastic bits and ingesting those right away. We've had dental hygienists come to the hearings and come to us and say, I'm actually cleaning these now out of our patients' teeth.
Wow.
So it's, small, but an enormous problem and a growing threat to our water bodies. What's gratifying is to see local leaders sort of stepping in where the Senate failed.
Okay, well, that's a good education. That's
It is.
good. I was really not quite sure what to make of why these are such a problem.
Yeah, well, first off, you shouldn't be scrubbing plastic against your face.
Right.
That's the first problem.
Right.
The second, part of it is that they just flow freely down into our water bodies, and we shouldn't be dumping plastic in water,
All right.
however small.
Now, what's this federal carbon protections?
Sure.
That, can you talk about that a little bit? Because
Yeah.
you were applauding about this.
Well, for a number of years, President Obama has attempted to sort of put standards in place that would lower carbon pollution from power plants.
Oh.
And this summer, he finally enacted rules to do just that. In New York State, we've had these standards in place since the fall of 2008 that would ratchet down carbon pollution from power plants. Carbon pollution is related to global warming.
What type of power plants are we talking about? Nuclear power plants? No.
No, we're talking about stuff that burn fossil fuels. That's what you get. Carbon pollution is a function of combustion. So a fire in a fireplace, you get carbon pollution. Gasoline in a car, coal in a coal-fired power plant, natural gas,
Right.
et
Coal,
cetera.
I can imagine, is carbon, but
Yep.
I just wasn't sure what the other.
Yeah, it's typically through combustion. That's where you get carbon dioxide. You also can get carbon from methane gas wafting off emissions from gas lines. So
Are the fuels getting better, though? I think I read that the coal, that's what Mark was mentioning, there's white coal. Again, I don't know, you're the expert, and I just said that they say they are trying to make a better product that doesn't make such a pollution.
yeah, I think we all learned a hard lesson this fall when the whole revelations came out with Volkswagen that they were producing clean diesel, when really they weren't producing clean diesel, they were cheating. So I've been always skeptical of somebody saying we can make coal clean. It's a dirty fuel. It's uneconomical now because of the low price of natural gas. And in this state, we're sort of moving beyond coal. You know, so there's a number of different technologies out there. So we really like these federal rules. You know, New York State is going to be able to comply with them 10 years in advance of when they're required to. That really shows the leadership we took in 2008 and 9 when I was in the governor's office doing these standards. You know, paid off by doing that sort of pioneering leadership.
That's great.
Yeah. But I must say that.
No wonder you're applauding it.
Well, I mean, I would have liked Obama to push New York State to do more. I think they let them off the hook. Their initial draft had New York to do much more. The governor's office did a very effective lobby campaign, and the Obama administration blinked. It's unfortunate. I wish they held New York to a higher standard to keep us reaching. You know, but the governor has set out some really lofty goals. He's supportive of the Clean Power Plan, but he wants to achieve half of our electricity from renewable energy or clean sources like solar and wind by 2030. He wants to achieve deep reductions in pollution in between now and 2050.
So let me, while we're talking about energy, there's one of the nuclear reactors up north that they want to shut down. Is it the Fitzpatrick plant?
It is, precisely, yes.
And that's
Up in
near
Oswego.
Syracuse?
Yep.
Oswego, Syracuse. So are you in favor of that being shut down? Are you anti-nuclear? Is there a place for nuclear in the mix of all the renewable energies or anything? Or?
You know, I think really the emphasis should be on sort of shifting away from energy sources that could cause harm. You know, nuclear energy in the short term has no carbon emissions at the facility itself. They do elsewhere. You know, so as those phase out, it gives us the opportunity to really ramp up more spending on solar and wind.
So you're happy that Fitzpatrick's going to be shut down?
Well, I'm not happy about the fact that we don't have a really good transition plan. The company just decided it's uneconomic, we're going to shut it down. What we really should do is think of a logical transition of moving that plant offline, but making the community whole. And
But
that's
you're
what
not
I'm really
crying about the fact that it's going to be shut. You're not pro-nuclear.
No, I mean, it's a really dangerous way and dirty way to boil water, essentially. I mean, you have a very toxic byproduct left over that's going to be around for hundreds of years. It probably doesn't make sense for that to be our approach to boil water to create steam for electricity. We should be really relying much more on solar and wind and doing a heck of a lot more.
Hydropower.
Yep. We should be doing a heck of a lot more to help businesses and homeowners cut their energy waste.
So now we hear that, you know, I don't know if you saw this a few weeks ago, but it was a study that solar panels are not so good because it's preventing the sun's rays from getting into the ground and feeding the nutrients that are in the soil.
I think
Did
I think there may be a couple places where that might happen, but
Did you hear about that?
Well, you hear a lot of different stories. I've heard a lot of different tales about wind power causing all sorts of health ailments.
Well, wind, you know, is an aesthetic thing also because some people say these are art forms, these wind turbines, and others say, oh, it's a travesty on our landscape.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a personal
I look at
opinion,
all this
but-
stuff and say we have a heck of a lot of built environment that could support solar. Wind, to me, and when I look at a wind farm, I think fewer kids are going to get asthma attacks, fewer seniors are going to have respiratory disease because of bad air quality, because it's not coming out of a smokestack. Wind is turning electricity without the pollution. So for me, I look at them as beautiful because it means fewer people getting sick, fewer seniors dying prematurely.
And and solar, you don't see as an issue in terms of, you know, the nutrients in the ground being an issue? Or
I think we'd have to see an enormous amount of solar across all of our landscapes for that to be a real issue. But some of this stuff gets out there and people pick up on it and
Well,
move it around as if it's a big
sounding the
problem.
alarm on solar, these folks, whoever, I forgot who's saying it, but, you know, they're sounding the alarm on solar the way you're sounding the alarm on coal and carbon and,
Yeah,
you know, so I'm just,
I get that.
everyone's sounding an alarm.
Yeah, and I think realistically people should be thinking about buildings and building solar into building skins, you know, on rooftops. I mean, you know, there's ample space there
Sure.
before we have to worry about solar taking over our nutrient load.
All right, so now we're going to be having a new Environmental Conservation Commissioner, Basil Sigos.
Yep.
Did I pronounce that right?
I think so. I think
Okay.
it's actually Segos, but close enough.
Segos.
Name like Iwanowicz, I should know how to pronounce other people's names right. But I think it's
There you
Segos.
go. So what are his, you support him, you're a fan of his. What's about him that you're such a fan of his for?
Well, we like, the fact that the governor has chosen somebody that we know and have worked with. I actually transitioned myself from working in the governor's office to be the head of the agency in 2010, so I know what it entails, and I know the personal sacrifice that goes into it.
So this guy is transitioning from the governor's office to the agency?
That's right.
Oh, okay.
So, I think it's somebody that we know, we've worked with, we understand, but obviously he's there to sort of carry out the governor's vision. There's good parts of the governor's vision and there's bad parts
Are
of
the
the
two of
governor's
you
visions.
buds?
Who's this? The
You
governor and I?
you and Basil.
Well, we've had our disagreements over time, but I think we understand this is a professional environment where you can work through those types of things.
You don't go
we didn't
hiking
s-
together, huh?
No, that we don't.
Well, I figured, you
Yeah.
could be enjoying the environment together, might be a good thing.
I try to spend my personal time with my family. I gave up a lot working in government and flying back and forth to DC, so my personal time is my family time now. I try not to work during it.
I hear you. Okay, well, yeah, come to the Four Corners for the Hanukkah menorah lighting.
There you go.
Okay,
This is
so.
the 6th or the 7th, I forget.
Sixth.
Sixth.
Sunday
the
night.
6th.
All right.
So, anything else you want to bring up that we didn't know enough to ask you about?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of stuff, but
Yeah.
the biggest priority, I think, facing a lot of environmentalists in the next year is New York State going to put its climate and clean energy goals into law so that everybody knows what the standards are. Businesses can sort of write a business model to make money on it. Environmentalists and the rest of the public health world can understand how dramatically we're going to reduce pollution, how fast we're going to do it, and how clean things are going to get.
And
how
and
certain-
another governor who might not see it the way this governor does, might shift course. And if it's in
Precisely.
law,
Yeah, what we saw in California is a great example of that. In 2006, they put their climate commitments into law under Governor Schwarzenegger. We've now got a couple of governors since. Jerry Brown is sort of implementing that, and the legislature is coming together to write new standards into law that increase the sort of pollution reduction benefit and the opportunities for clean energy. So when you put things in law, you create regulatory certainty and a business opportunity that sort of flows from that.
are you drafting your agenda for the next session now?
We
or-
are. Yeah, we'll finalize it in the next couple of weeks and sort of
Okay.
lay it out when they come back in
Well,
January.
we'll have you back and we'll talk about those issues at a future time.
Look forward to it. Thanks.
All right,
That's
so
great.
thank you very much. You're doing good work for the people in New York State, cleaning air, clean water. You can't argue with that. So keep on going with good success, and like Mark says, we'll check in with you to see where things are going.
Great, thanks.
Okay, keep up the good work.
I appreciate it.